Here's some background noise from you. So,
Is that for me?
all right, everyone. So we are at our last session here before lunch. We are here with Ana Marquez. She is the founder and CEO of Clinical Site Partners. She is an experienced site owner and director. At the institution level, Ana has experience coordinating protocols, building teams, expanding therapeutic indications, subject recruitment, auditing trials for regulatory compliance, creating site processes, and implementing administrative and financial policies to increase site efficiency. Ana has also negotiated hundreds of clinical trial agreements and budgets. Additionally, she assisted numerous research facilities with site expansion, AR process implementation, and new investigator training. At the sponsor level, Ana has served as a consultant on phase 1 through phase 4 projects, assisting with the feasibility process, protocol design, building trial budgets, and aiding with site selection. Ana is highly proactive in the research industry, presenting at major industry conferences, serving on various sponsor and CRO advisory groups for SCRS and ACRP. She has also served as a committee chairperson for global administrations such as DIA and SCRS. So thank you so much for joining us, Ana. I'll let you have the stage.
Thank you for having me as well. And thank you to SCRS because they provided me with a lot of wonderful information. And I'm going to share some of those stats with you now. They did a poll post-COVID, and I just want to go over some of those things. And then I think it would be good to discuss some of the challenges that we've had on the site side with regards to recruitment, operational challenges, and things like this. So going over the survey first. So 27% of sites had to modify the frequency of their visit schedules. That's because when COVID impacted us, which was largely in the months of March up until recently, and some of us are still very much affected, patient visits were changed. A lot of them went from physical visits to home visits or virtual visits. So it's been really very upside down for the sites. We've had to learn to do things very differently. And I know that the sponsors, it's the same thing for you all. You've had to scramble to come up with new monitoring plans. So 27% of us, a third of us almost, have had to change that. Then, and 46 of them reported their studies have modified the method of conducting their visits, moving to a more decentralized model. As we know, the FDA also had to issue guidance on this because our entire industry was affected and trials had to continue. So the 90% saw an increase in decentralized trials and remote monitoring. Many of the sites were not comfortable letting the monitors visit physically. And then also many of the sponsors sponsors and CROs both didn't want their staff flying because safety for the staff is a concern for all of us. 38% of sites merely had to pause for a short time as trial activity was put on hold from a sponsor or CRO. On my end, I actually have both I have a range of small to large sites. And I have to say that we saw a far larger impact. I was surprised when I saw that only 38% of sites saw this impact because on our end, we saw about 90% of our trials be put on hold, and maybe about 5% of our trials were canceled altogether. So that's that. And 60% of sites have been able to avoid closing their doors or pausing their operations. But that means, right, that 38% of sites either closed their doors or many had to reduce staff, come up with different ways to save money and things like that. Because unfortunately, expenses don't stop, but it's been very difficult to run our sites, knowing that we're not really seeing patients the way we were. And in some cases, we were entirely paralyzed. 83% of sites reported a decrease in enrollment. And I think a lot of this was, obviously, there's a lot of fear out there. The patients are scared to come into the sites. They're scared to leave their homes. They're seeing everything that's happening in the media. They don't want to get COVID-19. And then also a lot of regulations, local regulations, statewide regulations, telling patients or telling the public that you can't leave your homes. And so we have been tremendously impacted by this, unfortunately, which is why we've had to, do a lot of virtual sessions, visits, or home visits as well. 73% of the sites reported no change in retention, which is wonderful. Of the 26% that did report the decreased retention, 23% saw a decrease on the average. And then sites that were able to get patients enrolled into studies are retaining those patients on the trials. And really that speaks to the trust that patients develop with us. And frankly, it's been very challenging to get patients to our sites. And that is because especially patients that we don't know, patients that are coming from advertising, they don't know us. So it's been, we've had to reassure patients of our new safety measures, calling them the day prior to the visits to see if they have any symptoms, asking them to wait in their car, only letting one patient in at a time. I mean, we've had to change the way we do visits very, very drastically in our office. And I'm sure that other sites are seeing the same thing. Now, what challenges have we seen this past, it's been what, at least 6 months, 6 to 7 months. 78% of sites reported an increased workload associated with remote monitoring. And I can definitely attest to that. With monitors not coming into our sites, and mind you, for example, in my office, we still allow them to come in, but many of them, as I said, the sponsor CRO is not comfortable with them coming into the office. So this means that we're having to send them a lot of documentation, whether via email, having to jump into phone conferences, webinars, and that's really been very, very stressful on our staff. And imagine that we're basically not producing, right? We're not seeing the same number of visits, same number of patients that we were seeing. We're dealing with these trial cancellations. I've still got some trials that are on hold, though most of them have now been released. And we did see a lot of trials that were supposed to start Q1, Q2, Q3 actually get pushed onto either Q3, Q4. And it's been very, very difficult to navigate because you really don't know what you can count on anymore. And it's just been very, very challenging. I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact on the large site versus the small sites. And really, I can only speak from experience, and as well as, speaking, I talked to other industry colleagues. So here's kind of what I saw. For my larger sites, it was much more difficult because the overhead is substantially larger. Much more staff, larger rent, mortgages. So that was extremely, extremely stressful. To me, it was stressful for both the small, mid-size, and large sites. But the larger site was really the one that where my stress level was the greatest, I have to say. However, with that said, the larger sites, and perhaps because we're doing many, many more studies, the larger sites actually got going faster than my small and mid-sized sites. And again, I think that has to do with the number of trials. If you're doing at a small site, if you're running 10 trials, and in a larger site, you're running 60 trials, you can see how that variety of different, therapeutic indications and having a greater pipeline assisted the larger site in really being up and running faster in terms of doing visits and having trials released. So that's kind of what I saw. On the small site, with the small sites, the financial impact was less stressful because everything is smaller. You have less staff, less overhead. So that makes sense. You have pros and cons for both sides, sizes. The output of cash to continue the operations, overhead salaries. Initially, when COVID hit, I think we all thought this was going to be very short term. Initially, we didn't make any changes, salaries, nothing like that. We thought this is going to last 3-4 months. And then, come around July, we realized, okay, this is really going to, have a longer impact. And at one point, I'll be honest, we were thinking, are we going to have to reduce staff? Are we going to have to close maybe the smaller offices? We had to make very difficult decisions. We were very lucky in that we didn't come to that, because fortunately, very quickly, we started doing COVID trials. And that for us, really, I would say if we didn't have those studies, we probably would have had to lay off half the team. Like I said, close offices. So that's been a very, very difficult for us to navigate. A lot of us were able to get assistance from the SBA, but not everybody qualified. Not everybody received that. And so I do unfortunately know of sites that did go out of business altogether. I can tell you that sites today are still struggling tremendously, not just because we are, we've been in the red like many businesses right now. Anybody that's a business owner right now understands the pressure that we've all been under for, the last 6-7 months. But also for those of us that are doing COVID studies, many sites are doing vaccine trials. Thankfully, you have the issue of cash flow where you have to pay stipends. Right now, we're having to pay tens and tens of thousands of stipends out monthly, and many sites have exhausted their lines of credit. We are also dealing with the fact that, even if you pay monthly, we're not really going to see money from visits conducted for many months, for 3-4 months. And the reason for that is until that patient randomizes, we don't know, the sponsor doesn't know, how we're going to be paid. So that's been incredibly stressful, very difficult to navigate. The other thing that we had to do, our smaller sites were actually already fully on eSource and eRegDoc. But what we started seeing very early on, as early as March, sponsors and CROs started asking us, are we able to look at your data remotely? And for most of our sites, that was true. But for our largest site, we were still on paper. So we had to scramble to make decisions, to what do we do? We're going to have to go on eSource and eRegDoc, which we did. But then we were doing a large volume of trials. And so we had to make decisions, like, do we transition the existing studies into eSource, into eRegDoc, or do we just start out with the new ones? And those were very tough choices to make, especially because going on eSource and eRegDoc is extremely, extremely expensive. So, and that's something that sponsors are not always willing to, to reimburse us for. Rapid startup on COVID trials as well has been difficult. As I said, I have a trial that the stipend is high, and patients come in every day, and there's been no upfront financial assistance from the sponsors and the CROs to assist with that. We've had to hire additional staff to take on these special projects to do these vaccine trials. High volume of patients, short period of time. Then we've had to be more creative as well with enrollment, because we did see a reduction in enrollment. So we've had to take on additional costs of personnel and marketing and advertising. And sites were asking for reimbursement of these activities. They need the additional resources, but we're not seeing that from the sponsors. And today it's probably less than this, but 64% of sites have less than 3 months worth of operating cash in the bank. We've been impacted by this pandemic substantially for more than 4 months now. And so this decreased enrollment with study visits combined has really increased study expenses, and it's really taking a toll on us. So what can we do? What can we do? We're having to deal with now protective equipment costs, but you can talk to your banks if you're a site, see if they can increase your lines of credit. You will have to show them contracts to be able to get an increase. see if you can revise your payment terms with the sponsors and CROs, audit your accounts receivables for any monies that might be due to you. Sponsor CROs, help us eliminate withholding terms if you can, provide cost per patient advances or cover stipends upfront, please. If you're a patient, you can spread the word and help us survive this difficult times. Not sure if there's any questions.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much. That was a super insightful. Especially thank you to SCRS for some of the data that you referenced as well. But one question that was interesting, talking about the patient perspective. So in those appointments, what are some of the reservations that you're hearing from patients? Are you starting to see more reservations than traditionally would? I can imagine so. But
I have never seen the conspiracy theories out there that we've been dealing with. Patients are afraid. For example, with vaccine trials, they think that you're injecting them with something that's going to kill them. Just all kinds of things that they see in the media. They're picking up on that, and it's been very, very challenging, because we've had to educate our patients. No, we're not here to kill you. We're here to help solve this problem, and you still have to continue to see patients. The patients that we have had the least resistance from are patients doing chronic trials, oncology, COPD. Those patients we haven't had those issues with. But again, the new patients, those have been it's been tougher to recruit, guys. It's been tougher than ever with all these things that people are hearing and seeing. People think that you want to implant tracking devices on them. So I think we all have to work together to educate patients and let them know that while we're doing things quickly, we're still doing them, with quality in mind and safety always first.
For sure.
The survey results are mostly U.S. based. I see that somebody asked that question. Mostly U.S. sites that answered those questions.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and keep fighting the good fight. We're all in it, and you guys have a very unique perspective. The education is super important, so do everything that you can to continue that, and we wish you the best. And thank you so much for being a part of this event. I mean, it's very important to get the site perspective on this because really you're the ones interfacing with patients and participants. So without your perspective, we'd be kind of lost here. So
my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to be heading into a lunch break. So feel free to use the one-on-one networking. The meetups will be open and available until 1:15 when we restart. We are going to restart after lunch with Trevor Maxwell, talking about why men are missing out on clinical trials. He's the founder and pack wolf for Man Up to Cancer. So it's our second patient keynote. Do not miss it. And everyone have a good lunch break. Go make a sandwich or something. And be sure to network. There's a lot of good functionality here. So thank you again. We'll see you in about 50 minutes. Thank you, Anna.
And thank you, SCRS.